Arun, you're going to speak?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone out there in the virtual world. Welcome to Brooklyn Raga Massive's weekly concert and workshop series. BRM, if you don't know, is a nonprofit organization, 501c3, that has been presenting concerts for over 9 years, and we've had a weekly jam session. And during the pandemic, since the beginning of the pandemic in March and April of 2022, we started this virtual series. And since then, I guess we've put on, I think, over 100 different workshops with all different musicians from different styles and different parts of the world that have presented their music, their process, getting into the heads of all these incredible artists. So we've been really happy with this series, and we're excited for you all to join us today. My name is Arun Ramamurthy. I'm a violinist, and I'm really excited today to be hosting and having with us Samarth Nagarkar, a wonderful Hindustani vocalist, great friend, great person, and I think we're all going to learn a lot today. And before we get into it, I just want to mention a few things that are coming up. I'd say we're really excited that on September 21st, we are planning to get back in person, and we're going to be starting like a monthly series back at Branded Saloon, which is our old stomping grounds. We started our jam session back in 2012 at Branded Saloon on Monday nights, I believe. And it was like a different world at that time, but we're really excited that we're going to be going back there, and we're going to start with some of our great friends, Jay Gandhi on bansuri, Abhik Mukherjee on sitar, and Samir Gupta playing tabla. So that's going to be a really great concert that's happening September 21st. It'll be followed by the jam session, where we invite you to bring your instruments, your voice. I'll be there with my instrument, and we can all play together. So I hope you can make it that September 21st. And then stay tuned for more dates as we move forward. We're still trying to figure it all out, but we're excited to get this date on the calendar. So that's coming up, and of course, we have other concerts and other workshops going to be happening virtually. So, check out our website, brooklynragamassive.org. And we've been putting on all these workshops free of cost to everyone out there, and we've taken great pride in the fact that we can pay our artists each week as well. So we couldn't do it without the help of all you at home, though. So if you have the means and are able to, we would totally appreciate any donations that you can offer. I'm going to throw the link in the YouTube chat, where you can click through and make a donation if you are inspired. And with that also, the chat is a great place to ask your questions to Samarth. He's going to be speaking about some great topics in Hindustani classical music, and any questions you may have, any thoughts or clarifications you may need, you can put them in the chat, and I will pass them on, and I think Samarth might check it out too, but I'll be, kind of scouring the YouTube page for questions and comments. So please feel free to write in there. And without further ado, I welcome Samarth Nagarkar. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Arun. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me in this event, and it's always a pleasure to be a part of whatever BRM is doing and share what we know about music and enrich all of our, that's one of the best things about BRM. Across genres, we all get to share what we all know and learn so much every week. So I'm very happy to be here and talk about the subject today that is close to my heart.
Wonderful.
Today, as we were thinking about the different subjects that we could talk about, I think last year I'd done a workshop series on gharanas and gaiki, which is styles of singing. And today I thought I would talk more detailed about a single raga and the concept of how to understand raga better, how to understand the nitty-gritty and the nuances of studying a raga. The one of the biggest elements of rag sangeet or raga music is called the bandish or the composition. Composition holds the key to almost everything we do, even the genre itself, and the way the composition lends itself to improvisation kind of almost informs everything about that music. When we talk about Hindustani music, there are three kinds of streams, three main streams of Hindustani or North Indian classical music. Khyal, or the music that I perform, which is kind of, it won't be wrong to say that it is the predominant form of Hindustani classical music today. What most people sing when you say, I'm going to a Hindustani classical music vocal concert, you are going to a Khyal concert. Unless specified otherwise and say they say it's a Drupad concert, then that's the second kind of sub genre or sub branch of Hindustani classical music, which is Drupad. So there's Khyal, there's Drupad, and the third is instrumental Vadya music. Now, I say that it's a separate stream because it has a different format and a separate discipline with which it develops the raga. All of this has raga at its core, but how we approach it, how we develop it, how we bring out not just the emotions but also the personality of that raga, how we express the artist's personality through the personality of the raga. That whole amalgamation happens um, in a very special manner, and that is what you know we look up to when we listen to different genres. So when we say Drupad, we know that there's a long alap, nom tom alap that happens first. Then there is the actual composition which is performed. The composition is not something that is developed or improvised very heavily. You just sing the composition and maybe a little bit of rhythm play and then you let it go. Whereas in Khyal music, the bandish itself becomes the mode through which you explore the raga. We talk about Khyal bandishes in many ways. Actually, there is Vilambit Khyal, which is the slow tempo Khyal, the Drut or Madhyalaya Khyal, which is the medium to fast tempo Khyals, bandishes, and then there are several other forms of compositions such as the Trivat and Chaturang and all of these, which are, they have something novel in them. For instance, a Trivat is a kind of a composition that has actual poetry, sargam or solfege, and either tabla bowls or pakhavaj, syllables, or mridang bowls or something like that, or tarana bowls. That's a trivat. A tarana is a different kind of a composition which doesn't use actual poetry in any language. The poetry is abstract. So there are all of these other different kinds of compositions. But how do we use these compositions? The main heart of the music, the Vilambit composition and the Drut compositions, these can be used to understand ragas in great detail by understanding the different steps. The first step of listening to a composition is the mukhda. The mukhda is the starting of the composition. Now, I would like to take a minute before going into the mukhda and the throwing in all this terminology, just the construction of a composition, the basic construction of a bandish. In Rag Sangeet, there are primarily two, in Khyal compositions, there are two parts, the sthai and the antara. Drupad compositions have many more. There are four parts like sthai, antara, sanchari, abhog. But in Khyal composition, which we are dealing with today, there are two parts, the sthai and the antara. Sthai deals mostly with the main core of the raga, the usually the middle octave and the lower octave. The antara is once you reach the high sa, the high tonic, then it explores the higher octave briefly and then comes back and joins the sthai or the first part. So that is how a composition is created. To give you a very brief example, I'm going to sing a medium tempo composition in a rag called Purya Dhanashri. पायलिया झनकार मोरी पायलिया झनकार मोरी जनन जनन बाजे जनकार पायलिया झनकार. This is simple 2 lines of sthai. The sthai and the antara can be, like I said, the first part deals with this middle octave part, and the antara goes into the piya samajhavu samajhat nahi sasananad मोरी देगी गारी पायलिया झनकार मोरी. This was a brief demonstration of a very basic form of what a sthai and the antara is, the 2 parts of the composition. Now within this, the first line is called the mukhda. Mukhda literally means the face. So it's the face of the composition, it's the face of the raga, and by mukhda can also mean the starting point of the first line in tal. So it starts on the 9th or 10th beat of the tal of a 16-beat cycle. That was also called the mukhda. The distance between the starting point of the composition and the first beat of the composition, the sum, is also called the mukhda. So there are these multiple usages of the same word mukhda, but let's, for the purpose of this talk, just let's say the first line of the composition is the mukhda for now. So that means पायलिया झनकार मोरी. This is the mukhda. Janana janana baje janakar is the second line of the sthai, of the first part of the composition. Then you go back to पायलिया झनकार. When you start the bandish, if you study as many compositions as possible, you get to know as many mukhdas as possible, and each mukhda is a face of that composition and therefore a face of the raga. So a bandish literally shows you the face of the raga. And let me go into what I mean by face here. It's a very specific analogy. It's not to be taken lightly. Each raga, as we have, I'm sure, discussed in several other lectures here, is a raga because of the way in which the phrases are constructed, the timing with which those phrases are sung. So there are notes. Those notes put together in combinations become phrases, and those phrases have to be sung with a particular timing, a particular accent, to then become a raga. So even if I sing Sa re ga ma pa da ni sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. These are just the notes of Puryadhanashri. Ni re ga pa ma da pa ma da ni da pa ma ga ma re ga da ma ga re sa. These are the notes of the raga now, the phrases of Puryadhanashri. But it doesn't become Puryadhanashri unless the accents are right and the timing is right. Ne re ga ma re ga pa ma da pa ma ga ma re ga ma da ma ga re sa. This is what makes Puryadhanashri an individual entity. No other raga will have these notes in this particular order with this timing or these accents. The stretch on the dha, pa ma da pa ma ga ma re ga re ga ma da ma ga re sa. Re ga pa ma da pa. This is what makes a rag a rag. The fact that it's a set of notes, a set of combinations, but sung with a specific accent and specific timing and a specific order. So the mukadas immediately give us that. Payale ya jhanakar pamaga madare ni da pa. You know that this is where the mukada of this composition is. Let's look at another composition. Jayendra Jagadam. Another old traditional composition, right? Jayendra Jagadam Matanuma Nar ji jara rahe Jayendra Raja Gadam. So that we saw two compositions that give us the same mukda. Maga mada mare ni da pa. So if you're someone who's new to this music, if you've just started listening to Indian classical Hindustani Raga Sangeet, and then you're like, I don't know what rag this is, I can't make out, they all sound the same to me. This is a way to start differentiating between ragas. Look at the compositions, look at the songs, as some people call them, the bandishes, right? And if you see that the mukada itself, just the first line, when you memorize that, when you keep those in your mind, when you have a bank of them in Puryadhanashri, which is why before the way of teaching this music was that a young student comes to the guru and the guru would teach the student good 5, 10, 20, 30 different compositions in one raga. So by the end of that time, the student is completely clear about all the different possibilities in that raga. What are the phrases that are absolutely necessary, which is common in all those 20 compositions? What are the phrases or combinations that are novel, they're used only in a few ragas, in certain contexts only, in certain compositions, in certain contexts only. So then the student knows that these are the phrases that I can sing a lot. I can dwell on these phrases, note combinations, and this is what brings the essence of the raga out. And these note combinations, which I heard very seldom in certain compositions, I'm going to use them very sparingly just to bring out a new little, surprise element out of it. So that's how you study raga through bandish. Okay, so let's take a few more examples. So one of the things we saw from the two compositions that I sang, the two bandishes, the mukdas that I sang, both of them have a phrase which is kind of higher up in the octave. Maga mada mare ni ni da pa, and both of them landed on the pa. Payale ya janakar ni da pa, Chayendara jagata pa. Another third composition. Tana mana varu shama tore chababare moyeni ke lagata nana mudali savaro tana mana varu. So this is the full sthai, and the mukda is tana mana varu. So there's a third composition here that kind of focuses on pada pa or nida pa. So then that tells us that perhaps Puryadhanashri is a Pancham centric rag.
Yeah.
You spend. Go ahead.
All right, a quick question. So, were there specific, in different gharanas, were there different approaches to ragas? If you were from this gharana or that gharana, Puryadhanashri, did it feel different, and would they have different approaches to the raga? Is one question, and the other is the composers of these compositions. Who were they, and did that also differ based on did certain composers have tendencies or ways of expressing certain ragas that others didn't, and their bandishes like explored different parts of the raga?
Excellent questions, both. The first question, as far as gharanas are concerned, between one gharana and the other, I don't think we see much variance in terms of rag structure. In most ragas, at least the major popular ragas that we know of that most people sing across gharanas, ragas like Puryadhanashri, Yaman, Bihag, Miyake Todi, these have a consensus across gharanas. When we get into very subtle differences between one rag and another, like Suha, Sugrai, or these are your Paraj Kalingada, those, that's where it kind of gets, one gharana says no, but we sing Sugrai like this, and we call this composition Suha. Somebody else says no, we call this composition Sugrai. So there are these little, that's why these ragas are also very small ragas. They're not ragas which are expanded or sung very often or sung for, the scope of those raga development is very small. But in most of these major ragas, there is a consensus across gharana styles about what constitutes the core of the raga. The second question about who the composers were, it's amazing that despite the fact that these composers came from completely different varied backgrounds across time, there's a clear um, again consensus of what is the core of these compositions. These composers, the earliest composers of Khyal compositions were Sadarang and Adarang. Sadarang, his real name was Niyamat Khan. His nephew was Adarang. I just turned the Tanpura off since I'm speaking. So Sadarang and Adarang. Sadarang was Niyamat Khan, and Adarang is Firoz Khan, his nephew. Now we're talking, I think, 16th, 17th century, 17th century perhaps. This was a good century after Akbar and Tansen and everything. So around that time, there was this ruler called Muhammad Shah Rangile. In his court, Niyamat Khan was a very senior Drupadya. He used to play the veena, Rudra veena, which is also called bean. Now the story goes that there was a time when the king asked Niyamat Khan to play along with another young up-and-coming musician, a vocalist. Niyamat Khan said, "I'm sorry, but that breaks protocol. Me being a senior beankar, it's not appropriate for me to sit and play with this. He's good, he's talented perhaps, but he's still got ways to go. And I don't think it's appropriate for you to place him on the same platform as me and expect us both to kind of sing or play together." So the king said, "Well, I'm the king, and you're under my employment, etc., etc. So it's my order. You either play or you pay the price." He said, "I'll pay whatever price." So he was actually expelled from the court. So now, having left the court, he's no more a court musician, and he's not getting his income. And if your patron stops patronizing you, in those days that was their only source of income, and not only was the musician living on that, his entire family, his students, and everything, there's a whole setup around this system, right? So now Niyamat Khan had nowhere to go. He had to leave the city, stay outside in the outskirts somewhere. Now he devised a very clever way of getting back into the king's good books. He started composing little songs, which today are our Khyal compositions, and teaching it to the wives or the Nach girls, the dance girls, who had direct access to the king. So the king used to have, his light entertainment, and these musicians would go there and they would sing all these songs, and these songs were all in praise of the king. Muhammad Shah Rangile, you are the greatest king of all, and there's no other king as benevolent as you. And and the king was, who is this? Who is making these compositions? And then he started looking, and then finally he landed up at the doorstep of Niyamat Khan, and they broke their, this truce, and they said, "Okay, never mind. Let's just come back to the court." And he became reinstated as a court musician. So, but this is supposed to be, legend has it, that this was how Khyal compositions were originally composed. They were not, meant to be like serious raga compositions like the Drupads were. It was a good 100 years after this time, there in Gwalior, Haddu Khan, Hassu Khan, their Nathan Khan Pir Baksh, and their uncle Muhammad Khan, Bade Muhammad Khan, these musicians are credited with actually creating a format of presentation to Khyal compositions. That is when there was a lot of addition to the repertoire, and whatever bandishes were there, they said, okay, we have these compositions. There were lots of drupads also that were converted into Khyal formats. They said, we are going to move the entire development of the raga, which happens first before the composition is presented in Drupad. We are going to move that entire development into the composition, and we are going to develop the composition, the raga, just as the composition tells us. So, one is the fact that the composition tells you where the mukhara, where the the heart of the raga is, what are the phrases to be sung. And then you actually have to follow the development of the raga also based on that composition.
So it kind of gave more of a structure or form to the development of the raga.
Exactly.
So would you say it was maybe more open during Drupad times, and then it
Yes,
became a little more specific during Kayal because the compositions then became
a-
specific?
absolutely, absolutely. So before this, the development of the raga was entirely, it's a clean slate. The artist sits there, his tampuras are playing, and he starts beginning from one note to another, and he develops this whole beautiful canvas, and he's got the it's a structure of the raga that he builds up. Whereas in Khyal, you start with the composition. If you listen to the older Gwalior, Jaipur, Gharana musicians, they would actually very often start straight away from the Khyal. There was no, nowadays we have a small opening alap that introductory alap that we do for like a couple of minutes or 2-3 minutes of the raga, and then all sing the main phrases and then introduce the composition. This wasn't even done back in the day. They would just start with the composition, sing sa or sing maybe one phrase of the raga and just go into it. So, ah, Chayendara jaga tira kita din, tabla comes in from there right away. And from there, the composition has all these different phrases that are lined up one after the other. So the singer chooses these very compositions to develop the raga.
Um, yeah, and I'm curious to know if in Drupad times, like how when we say that during Kayal, the raga sort of became a little more specific to these compositions. Did that actually change the form of the raga, the movements, and some of the grammar, like the phrases? Were they different in Drupad versus in Kayal?
I don't think so. Because we still have Drupad singers. It's not like Drupad is an extinct form. Drupad
Right.
is very much there. There are
Right.
Drupad singers even now, excellent Drupad singers. And there is a very clear, similar rag structures, whether you're singing Drupad or Khyal. I haven't come across, a big difference in the way a raga is dealt with, except in the format in which it's presented.
Okay.
So the
More
presentation,
structural.
yeah, the form of presentation is different. The repertoire is different and the technique is different. We have techniques like tans, we have techniques like all of these things have made it different from Drupad, but not the actual rag phrases. So we discussed that the first raga, first line or the mukhadas of compositions showed us that there are certain, core areas of the raga. Like in Purya Dhanashri, now we know Pancham. We discovered 3 compositions in which pa is given the core. It's kind of so you sing the rag around Pancham. You don't. It's not a rag like Purya, for instance, or Darbari Kannada, where you sing a lot in the Mandra Saptak. Those compositions all have, in fact, the mukhadas of Purya. If you look at all Mandra Saptak. Mandra Madhyam, literally, it's so low.
Yeah.
Darbari Kannada, all those compositions are usually in the Hey Dulhan Teri Aache. It's all in the lower octaves. Whereas Purya Dhanashri, that's where the rag really flourishes.
Right.
So that's what the Bandish tells you. When you have all of these different mukhadas and compositions all pointing to you in one direction, you know that that's where you should go if you want this rag to really flourish.
Right.
Then what are the different other phrases in this raga? Ma re ga pa. all of the compositions. You don't have ni re ga ma pa or ni za re ga ma pa. None of this. It's ma re ga pa ma ga ma re ga ma re ga pa ma da pa. So it's a vakra rag. You know that this is another thing that the compositions tell you. Pa ma ga ma da re ni da pa. It's all vakra, means it goes zigzag, crisscross all the time. आना वे मिल जाना वे आना वे मिल जाना वे सभी दे सब गाना वे आना वे मिल जाना वे. See how it all goes in zigzag, zigzag. Ma re ga pa ma da ma pa ma ga ma re ga ni re. That's another thing that the composition tells you. This is how this rag is supposed to move.
And they become phrases that you can use in your own manodharma, your own
Absolutely.
improvisation. So now
Exactly.
you have this starting point that from there you can use this one phrase but then build on that phrase.
Exactly.
It's giving you content.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, there are some questions on YouTube. We can go there if you like, or if you had something to say.
Now, let's see the questions.
Okay. So, Emil Parekh says, I started taking lessons again back in April. When I started learning a new rag, I learned one chota khyal, then one onto a bada khyal, rather than taking the approach of learning many different bandishes. What pros and cons do you see in this approach over being exposed to many mukras from the start?
Yeah. The way in which we learn music today is also informed by many other factors. Are you a full-time musician? How much time do you have to learn music? How many hours a week are you putting into learning music? How many hours a week are you putting into practice of this music? How many ragas do you want to learn in a certain period of time? When I was learning music, I used to have about 2 or 3 lessons a day sometimes. So it was a very immersive kind of learning, where I'm literally at the guru's house. My talim's happening, my riyaz is happening, and everything's going on in a very immersive fashion. So there was this amount of time that I had to learn, and I would immerse myself in the rag to such an extent where for 3 months, if I'm learning Puryadhanashri, I'm learning only Puryadhanashri, whether I'm singing in the morning or evening or night. For riyaz, I didn't care about the time theory of the ragas. My lessons were happening at every 2 point, and I had this, we used to have Walkman in cassettes in those days. Or I used to constantly have that in my ear listening to that raga. To a point where at one point, everything around me started looking like it was moving in that raga or speaking in that raga. It's very difficult to put it in words, but everything looked like Puryadhanashri, or everything looked like Bhageshri, everything felt like Bhageshri. When you immerse yourself in that raga day in and day out for about 2 or 3 months, that's what happens. So that is the kind of immersion that I went into, and many of my colleagues, I'm sure, have gone into when they learnt a certain raga as full-time musicians, because that is what I was going to be, that is what I wanted to be. Whereas if somebody is learning to know about the music, and sure, I want to be on stage and be able to perform a little bit here and there, but I also have a job that is my primary thing, and I have a family, and I have a certain amount of time that I want to give this music as a hobby. In that case, most teachers will teach you 1 or 2 compositions, or 3 or 4 at the most, and introduce you to the raga, introduce you to the pros and cons, to the basic structures, the most important phrases, and just tell you that these are the other phrases of the raga. The self-discovery process, if you have to discover them yourself, if you have to immerse yourself and understand and make that raga, that composition, a part of yourself, for that process, I think it's important to learn as many compositions as possible.
Yes, I think that makes sense. In Carnatic music, it's very much similar concept, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
That learning compositions is the way to really understand a raga. So we always start with learning a varanam in that raga, if there is a varanam. And then you learn some compositions, and then only then do you actually get into any improvisation. But that the first step is to learn the compositions, because all the rasa, the feeling, the bhava is all coming from these compositions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that is very wise. There's another question here that
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to pass on. Any thought on the absorption conversion of Bandesh ki Tumri into Chota Khayal?
Yeah, Bandesh Ke Tumri was a kind of Tumri that was sung in Lucknow. Tumri is uh, another sub-genre of uh, Hindustani classical music. The focus of Tumri lies more in the lyrics than in the raga structures themselves. So, for instance, if I'm singing a Vilambit composition and singing it as a khyal, the Dhruv compositions even, then the focus of it is entirely on the raga, and I cannot take liberties with the raga. Whereas in a Tumri, even if the Tumri is in say Khamaj or Kafi or Tilak Kamod or anything like that, I still have the liberty of moving out of that raga or doing something that is un-raga like, as far as I justify, um, you know, a connection with the words or the lyrical, the poetry. For instance, I'm singing something in Khamaj, and there is a description of rain. I can easily move out of Khamaj into a Malhar or a monsoon raga for a bit and then come back. It's a very commonly done thing. So something like that, when people do, that's acceptable in Tumri, because you're not the lyrical content or the poetry assumes uh, more importance than the raga purity. So Bandish ki Tumri is one such kind of Tumri. There are two kinds. There's Bol Banao ki Tumri, which is in the Purav Ang Tumri in Banaras and that area. And the Bandish ki Tumri came about in Lucknow and that part of the country, which had more, to do with faster compositions. They had a lot of lyrics packed into them. I can give you an example. आज मन बस गई रे तेना. This is a rag called Kafi Sindura.
Sorry, Kafi Sindura?
Yeah. Kafi is a rag, Sindura is another raga in the same family. But here this composition, that's why I said it's a Bandish ki Tumri. So as a raga, it straddles both Kafi and Sindura. So it's called Kafi Sindura. Some people sing it as pure Kafi, some people sing it as Sindura, some just call it Kafi Sindura. It's a Tumri essentially. आज मन बस गई रे, आज मन बस गई. Better?
Better.
आज मन बस गई रे, आज मन बस गई. सावरे की सूरतिया प्यारी प्यारी सखीरी, कहाँ कहूँ तो से. अपने जिया की बीती हाली रिवाऊ के दिन, देखे बलन परत मुझे, आज मन बस गई. So you see that one of the hallmarks of this composition is that A, it's usually romantic in its description. B, it's packed with words. It's packed, almost there's one word on every syllable, on every beat almost. That's typical of a Bandish ki Tumri. And Bandish ki Tumri used to happen, like I said, mostly in Lucknow. And your previous question about different composers and how they contributed. So this was, I think, one of the elements of how Bandish Ki Thumri became integrated into Drut Khyal and Madhyalaya compositions. Some composers composed pure Khyal compositions, which were like Payal Ya Jhanakar, which we heard before, just 2 lines in the Sthai, 2 lines in the Antara. Very simple. No, not going into too much of lyrical. I mean, they have lyrical beauty also. That's one of the Bandish has to be a great mix of rag, tal, and poetry. But they're simple. They're 2 lines of Sthai, 2 lines of Antara, and you're done. But there were these other composers who preferred to, explore the lyrical aspect a lot more. So there are lots of compositions which have long sthais and long antara. So that I think was an offshoot of the Bandish Ki Thumri family, and that slowly kind of got integrated into uh, khyal in the Drut composition, or the Chota Khyal as they're called. Chota Khyal is the small khyal, which are the fast compositions. So that's what happened. So it was quite a uh, quick transition. But it added a huge dimension. So Ratan Chankar ji, S.N. Ratan Chankar, my Guru Dinkar Kaikni, they have a lot of those compositions which are rich in words and very long compositions.
And what about instrumental compositions? My understanding is that there are some compositions that are written just for certain instruments, or that sitar compositions, for example. Two questions. One is, do those compositions have any lyrical content? And two, do they differ in any way in the way the ragas are expressed?
Ragas are expressed, no. It's the same concept. The Mukhra will give you the best, face of what this raga is. It attacks right the core of the raga, and in every line it will show you different wonderful ways in which the raga is, explored. And your first question of lyrical content, no, there's no lyrics in an instrumental composition. However, they do have specific bowl depending on how the sitar or sarod instruments are struck. On the left hand is used for the melody. If you're a right-handed player, that is, your left hand is used for melody, and the right hand is used for strumming the notes, right? And it's either a da ra. The upward stroke is a da in sitar, and the downward stroke is ra. So it goes da ra da da ra da da ra. There are these bowls. So in a composition, that in a sitar composition or sarod composition, they actually have to also teach you, on one hand the melody, and the other hand the bowl structure of the composition. So those are the two elements that are taught in an instrumental composition. But in khyal composition, it's just the lyrics. And the reason we know more compositions in a rag is because it shows you. For instance, let me quickly demonstrate a couple of composition in Bhageshri. Now, if the composition okay, so let's take So my development is going to be around this area to start with. I use the mukda as my first entry into rag development. Ma ga re sa re sa ni sa ni da ma ni sa ko na ga ha ni sa ni da ni sa ni ma da ni sa da ni sa ma sa ga ma re sa ko na ga bha. This is how my development is going to go, and I'm going to explore one phrase after another of the raga. However, let's say my mukda is here, okay? I'm going to go to another. Mo man na avana aya sodana sangajan age more manam. Now this composition has the sound, the high sound. Sangajan age more manam. Now, if this is a composition, I start with doesn't make any sense. Manar that's where my alap is going to start. Ni da ni da ma pa da ga ma da ni sa mo manam.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So when you're singing the composition, so the part that's set, how much room is there for improvisation there? Because I draw the comparison to Carnatic music where you have sangatis. You have the first line, same lyrical content. Vata piganapatim, vata pigana, right? So you can have different phrases or different evolutions of the same line, variations where it gets busier and busier. Many of those are set. So, over the years, certain sangatis have been set, certain variations have been set. Does that exist in these kayals?
No.
Does it? So it's very much. This is the way this is sung.
Yes, the first map is laid out. Beyond that, everything is improvised.
So the composition element itself is really the same way it was taught to you, the way it was
Yeah.
taught to the teacher before.
Exactly.
And the musician themselves won't really go away from that set melody until they're improvising.
Yes. So the first time I sing the melody, I will sing it exactly as it is taught. The composition I meant. The first time I sing the bandish, I will sing it exactly the way it was taught to me, to my teacher, to his teacher, and to his teacher, and to his teacher. That will remain exactly the way it is. And I can prove that because I can take any raga that I have sung, and I can take a recording of my my dada guru or my guru's guru, and fortunately we have recordings now, and I can play both of them and show you that it's identical, and it's the first time that we sing it,
Right.
or maybe the second time that we sing it,
Ah,
and from then
then-
on
yeah.
we have to interpret it the way
Where you are.
we see it differently.
Yeah.
Then nothing is the same. The first time the composition is exactly the same.
Sure.
I sing it maybe 2 times, absolutely the same. The third, fourth, fifth time, I actually sing the same composition ideally. Now, there are again, this is where the Gharana distinctions come, right? Some people sing the composition once and then go into Alap directly in some Gharanas. But in Gwalior, in Agra, in Jaipur, the way it is done is that you sing the composition once or twice exactly the way it is done. Let me give you a quick example and then we'll end the session. Yeah?
A few questions that I'd like to ask because
Sure.
asked on YouTube.
I'll just finish this one
Yeah.
subject and then we can go to that. Rag Gaud Malhar. Is the Tanpura clear?
Yes.
Ka ho ama so priyeta aake Identical 2 times. Third time, I'm just still singing the composition here. Then I took one phrase from the composition. See, I'm taking phrases from the composition and exploring the raga. So this is how bandish is used. The khyal compositions are used to understand raga, to develop the raga, to explore the different possibilities, and so on and so forth.
Beautiful, beautiful demonstration, Samarth, and thank you so much for that. There's, somebody asked here that they're interested to know where ghazals singing falls into this, which is kind of it has vast possibilities of expression. So how do ragas show themselves in ghazal?
A ghazal is a form of poetry. No, it's not really a musical form. I mean, yes, people sing ghazals, but it's not a form of music, like a genre of music, in the sense that the main focus of a ghazal is the poetry of it, the rules of poetry, that there is a certain meter and there is a rhyme, and beyond a rhyme there is a radif, which is a common ending phrase or a word that comes at the end of the two lines of the first couplet, and then at the end of every couplet. So there are certain rules that form the kind of poetry that is ghazal. Each ghazal has a different, each couplet in a ghazal has a different theme. So that's a whole different, form of poetry in itself. But people have always tried to sing it. Now there was a kind of, so what do you do with poetry? You recite poetry, right? So you either recite poetry in just plain simple word recitation, or they used to recite it in a certain tune, like a signature tune. They would have a particular tune, and all their ghazals that were in that meter would fall in that particular tune, the poet himself or herself. So that was called a tarannum. So tarannum mein ganas, or to sing or to recite the poetry in a particular tune. That's where ghazal as a musical form was for most part of, until very recently. I think maybe around 100 years or so ago, ghazal, 150 years ago, it actually became a form of actually singing. But it was still nothing to do with rag sangeet. I mean, there was ragas you can have a raga, you can not have a raga, you can move from one rag to another. You're not tied at all to rag sangeet, the rules of ragas when you sing ghazal. It's a completely independent form altogether. Again, poetry is the focus. It's a form of poetry, but people who like to sing it, and then eventually, I mean, of course, Begum Akhtar came along, Mehdi Hasan came along. They all kind of brought a different texture to the way in which they presented these ghazals. They would usually, some of them would compose these ghazals in a certain raga. Sure, I mean, why not? There's no, it's again, like the question says, its possibilities are vast. So of course, you can express as many, you can bring ragas into it, and it's a tune at that point. It's not really, when you talk about rag sangeet, you're talking about a certain discipline of presenting a raga, of exploring the raga, the khyal, the bandishes, the taan, the bol baat, every 2-3 avartans or every 2-3 tal cycles, the alap or the taan that I'm doing assumes there's a different statement, there's a different subject that I'm taking and exploring. That is what really makes rag sangeet. a song that is composed or a poem that is composed in a tune that is based in a raga doesn't really make it raga music, if that answers the question.
Sure. Yes, thank you. I think we may have run out of time, but thank you, Samarth. Wow,
Thank
this
you.
is really,
It was a very vast subject to cover, and I don't know. I mean, if I was able to do justice to explaining as many things as possible, but I think we will need many sequel to this
yeah.
talk, and we'll have to explore this in a lot more detail going forward. But
Yes,
yeah,
for
it was fun.
sure. And if we take anything from it is learn compositions. Wherever you are in any stage of learning raga music, compositions are the way to get into a raga to really, at every level, even, because even at any point, if I want to really get inside of some particular raga, I'm going to learn a song in it. And then I learn that song and then maybe one more, and then all of a sudden you have it on your hands, you have it in your body, and then you can express it. It becomes part of who you are. So compositions are a beautiful way, and I thought the topic today was wonderful, and I think something that's good for all of us to remember. So
Yeah,
thank
thank you.
you, Samarth.
No, thank you, Arun. Thank you for keeping us on track and in this discussion, and thank you. A big thanks to BRM for and for hosting these workshops, especially in the times that we are. It's nice that we're able to share all of these things. Concerts are concerts. We all miss them, but in the interim, it's nice to share this and kind of we have more informed listeners when we go back on stages. So it's
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, I think that's great. Great. Um, all right. Well, I think it's time to say goodnight. And, we have a workshop again next week. And then in 2 weeks from today, we'll be live in person at Branded Saloon in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn. So I hope, for Jay Gandhi and Abhik Mukherjee and Samir Gupta, three of the OGs of BRM. So I hope you can make it for that. Samarth, I hope I see you there, but I understand if you won't be able to make it. Samarth's got a 4-month-old baby. So I'm sure he may be busy, but who knows? Maybe he'll be there
Yeah,
too.
somebody suggested that I do a workshop on how to sing without practice when you have a 4-month-old at home,
I'll take that
and, and
workshop.
and and without practice and without sleep. So
Yeah, yeah. Very carefully. All right. Okay, Samar, thanks again, and good night to everybody. Have a wonderful night. Thank you.
thank you.
Bye.